We want to welcome everyone who has joined us already. We're just waiting for attendees to continue populating into the room, so give us just another minute or so. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. There has been a lot of work put into putting this together. We have a great representation here of a lot of our local community theaters in Tucson. We are going to start out this evening just by going over some of our engagement guidelines, and we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first being, before I get into the guidelines, is that we want to let you know that these have been established in accordance with the goal of this town hall series, which was to create a more inviting and equitable experience for all of our local and visiting artists. The first stage in our town hall series is thanks to the many voices of our local performing arts community who have participated in a survey regarding the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. You'll hear us refer to this as BIPOC throughout the rest of this series, as well as other community members who have witnessed hardships and inequities for these populations while engaging with our performing arts community. A wide diversity of voices are represented in the data that we will be sharing with you today. This includes performers, production team members, technicians, writers, and other supporters of the arts. Several of these participants have also shared testimonies of personal experiences and or that of which that they have witnessed. This survey data and these stories are a crucial foundation for our solution-focused intentions. We as a community must first be willing to listen and understand. Only then can our leaders and community create meaningful plans of action to create a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable performing arts community. With this mission in mind, we ask that all participants and attendees of this town hall series please keep the following guidelines in mind. So firstly, all communication should be truthful but respectful. Feel encouraged to speak your truth, but understand that your truth is not always the same as another person's. This space is intended to be a safe space for this civil discourse. Second, safety is our #1 priority for all participants and panelists. Sharing and hearing new or unfamiliar ideas can be uncomfortable. We are taking this opportunity to lean into this discomfort without compromising our safety. This can often lead to growth, and in order to grow, it is often necessary to experience this discomfort. There's going to be an opportunity for everyone to step up as well as maybe step back. All participants are encouraged to contribute their voice. Moderators, including myself, will ensure that no specific person or institution is dominating the conversation. This is an opportunity for those who may have not felt empowered in the past to maybe share their voice today and step up. And for those who may typically contribute to a majority of the dialogue to maybe take a step back. We highly encourage self-care. The content that we are going to be discussing and sharing during this town hall series can be triggering or upsetting. We absolutely want to remind everybody to take that time to breathe or step away, whatever that might look like. If you're feeling emotionally affected throughout the event, please take breaks as needed. Feel free to go off camera and or move into a different physical space and come back to the meeting when willing and able. We also have a designated moderator and support that you can message directly in the Zoom PM. And this is going to be Chanel Bragg. She is with the Arizona Theatre Company, and she can speak with you in regards to any support that you might need in this matter. And we encourage leaders and community members to establish new relationships and engage in discussions with each other during and after this town hall series. That is absolutely the foremost goal of this event. This is an important step to pursue interagency solutions and collaborative efforts to enhance diversity and inclusivity in our community. Participants will be engaging primarily through the group chat and the Q&A feature. As well as private messaging. Please keep in mind that if you do submit a question through the Q&A feature, you're going to be asked if you'd like to have that question be anonymous. If you do not click that is going to be anonymous, your name will be listed on that question. So I'd like for everyone to just please keep that in mind. We ask that participants refrain from engaging in the following type of conduct and or report the following conduct to a moderator if it occurs at any point during the town hall. Sending or receiving private or group messages that contain images, links, and or language intending to cause harm to the individual or individuals receiving that message. Any personal video screens, any background images, if we can keep that appropriate, not containing any vulgar language, no nudity, racial or gender specific slurs, no demographic specific hate language, or any other language or images where the intent is to cause harm to another person or a group. Violations of any of these restrictions will result in immediate pause of the town hall event. A verbal warning will be given that the conduct ceases immediately or the offender will be removed from the Zoom meeting. Individuals who may not have participated in the survey or shared a personal testimony are going to have an opportunity at a designated time during this town hall to come forward and share those stories. Speakers are encouraged to share experiences specific to the Tucson or Arizona performing arts community. Individuals sharing personal testimony are essentially going to have the floor while speaking without interruption from any of the participants or moderators, with some limited exceptions, which are the following. So questions, of course, should not contain any vulgar language, any of those racial or gender specific slurs, any demographic specific hate language, or any other language where the intent is to cause harm. Any violation of this restriction is also going to result in immediate pause of the town hall event. That question will not be read or answered. A verbal warning will be given that the conduct ceases or you will be removed from the Zoom meeting. And then, of course, these questions are going to be introduced at appropriate stopping points where we will check in with the panelists and the presenters to go ahead and get those questions answered to the best of our abilities. Thank you, Richard. Okay, and then sending, receiving private or group messages that contain, again, any of the before mentioned inappropriate images or links that are intending to cause harm. Any violations of this will result in immediate pausing of the event, verbal warning, and removal from the Zoom meeting. Okay, the speaker makes any statements threatening physical, social, and or economic harm towards another person, individual, or institution. So keep in mind, as we are having others share personal testimony, to not make any statements of this sort. Also, if that does occur, the town hall will be halted immediately, and that person will be given a warning or resumed from the meeting. We do have a short amount of time today, so please keep that in mind if you are wanting to come forward and share a story. That any testimonies going over 5 minutes, we will give a courtesy 1-minute wrap up, and that will be requested by the moderators directly. And another thing to keep in mind also, so please keep the testimony specific to experiences that occurred in Tucson or Arizona. And anyone who is not sharing stories specific to our geographic location is going to be given a redirection to make that content consist of that specific space, or be given a 1-minute wrap-up request. Okay, and if anyone has any questions regarding any of the guidelines, please feel free to submit that to the Q&A. Otherwise, I am going to go ahead and hand it off to Richard.
I thank you very much, Mara. My name is Richard Thompson, and I will be narrating and summarizing some of the findings that have occurred for the Tucson Arts Town Hall on race, society, theater, and understanding. I also want to emphasize that the findings and that these anecdotes were provided from the local community members. So our table of contents in brief summary, we were able to break down all of the findings from the data into 6 particular parts: a brief introduction, surveyed demographic identifiers, race, roles, and responsibilities in theater, how those aspects that were questioned and how community respondents felt, and actual fears that still occur within the local Tucson community and arts district. We also were able to provide a small summary of thematic elements that seem to appear throughout many of the personal anecdotes that emphasize a foundation that is still continuing in our local community. So in the introduction, what I'd like to emphasize is that we asked our local community a series of questions in which they answered over the course of about a month that was going to identify who they were for their own volunteering, as well as their role in community and other forms of artistic expression within Tucson. It's important to identify that all the answers were anonymous, with the exception of those that chose to present themselves and wanted to volunteer their anecdotes to be discussed, which will be occurring at the end of this presentation. Within this methodology, we wanted to make sure that we helped try to correlate we wanted to help make sure that we allowed respondents to self-identify through both race and ethnicity, as well as sex and gender, the roles and experiences within the Tucson artistic community, how those roles and responsibilities have been represented, and how Tucson represents itself in the artistic community, both illicitly and complicitly. Now, within those as well, after you'll see the data, there is going to be personal anecdotes in which you will see of feelings of bias and discrimination, as well as explicit examples of those same negative aspects that pervade the community to this day. The surveyed demographic identifiers. We used 2 specific questions that had a somewhat open-ended answer structure so that people were able to customize how they identified themselves, both ethnically, nationally, and racially, as well as biologically, and how they identified themselves sexually and through gender. All of which could be somewhat complicated, but actually becomes very simple when it comes to identifying the self. Within this, we had a very large number. We hit about 108 respondents. And in this first graph, what you're going to see are those in which I was able to break down with a slight margin of error of plus and minus 5 of those that identified themselves anatomically binary or cis. As you'll see in one of the columns, I have LGBTQTS, and that itself will be in the next chart because there were many respondents that identified within that group. And with that many, it deserves its own representation to show and be able to actually illustrate that to say what one feels and whom they are is not necessarily something that can be identified on a graph as simply as this. So we have those who preferred not to say, and those who even went on the other extreme, those that said all of the above, into a whole variety of answers that one were able to identify. Specifically of cis, those who identified under cis, male and female, we had about 19 respondents. For women, we had 49. Now, out of 108 respondents total, that's quite overwhelming. And it actually shows a large indicator of how many women are represented within the Tucson theatrical community. Now, within that, that LGBTQTS group, we also wanted to make sure that everyone was still being represented. And those that were being represented, I was able to correlate in groups such as trans, fluid, non-conforming identity, man and woman. And the reason why we wanted to make sure that we had these particular columns available was that those in whom identify themselves through definitions that are not defined through traditional means are still representative of the community they're in. And as you can see, we had roughly a third of those total members, a little over a fourth of the total members that were found within this category. Race and ethnicity, one of the biggest markers, if not the inception of the survey. Now, again, I wanted to go and make sure that we represented everyone as we could the most accurately as possible. What you are seeing right here is a 1-to-1 ratio of 108 people. Now you're going to see we had 46 respondents that came as white as one of the largest numbers. And then we had some of those that felt that their ethnic and their ancestral heritage was so diverse that it was much more accurate to apply themselves as all of the above. To say that there was only 2 would be a bit of a misnomer because there are many in which feel that way. And as you're going to see in the next 2 slides, for biracial and triracial respondents, with the same 1-to-1 correlation, that Tucson itself is a widely diverse community that is not just beholden to one particular ethnic base or another. We are really a melting pot within itself, a melting pot within the Southwest. The biracial breakdown. Well, as we can see, one of the larger numbers was those who identified as Latinx and white, so as well as white and black. We also have indigenous and white and Latinx and Middle Eastern. Now, we have 3 members, or excuse me, we have 2 members of Asian and white. That's a mistake on my part. But what I want to emphasize in this breakdown is that the homogeneity that occurs within our community is emphasizing a greater diverse population that is not only representative of the United States as a whole in both urbanized districts and once we start moving away from rural districts, but it really does provide us a very accurate representation of a smaller example of the entirety of the country. The triracial breakdown. Again, like with many members that had already been able to identify as all of the above, as which I had shown 2 slides prior, we have many members of our society that have come from such a wide and diverse background that it would be a misnomer and it would be an offense to try to pigeonhole one person as one ancestral base. Race, roles, and responsibilities in theater. Now, after being able to help identify those that were within the community, we wanted to be able to see in what part of the Tucson arts community do they find themselves in, how long have they been here, and what roles and responsibilities do they typically identify therein. Overwhelmingly, the respondents have been here for over 9 years. We have just up to second, we have 0 to 3 years, which is a very interesting number. We have many that are just quote unquote just starting or just finding their new career in the theatrical or the artistic community. But we have many that have been here and have been doing this for 9 years or more, many times for well over a decade. In fact, some of the outliers were those that had been doing it for 30, 40, and onwards years. This particular category, the role in which respondents perform within the Tucson arts community, was again necessitated 2 specific graphs. And the reason being is upon looking at the data, while there were many, as you can see on the graph to the left with single roles, there were many respondents that had immediately put down performer and artist. In fact, I would not be surprised if many of those that filled out the survey at all had been in that particular role at one point in their career. But second was multi-talented. Multi-talented deserves its own particular graph because many members of the Tucson community of all ethnic bases and all gender identifying identities are not stuck in one role or the other. Now, I have not been able to ascertain if that is out of sheer volunteering or if that is out of necessity. But the reality is, overwhelmingly, we had many recipients, or many respondents that found themselves under artistic staff, technical backstage, some of which that still consider themselves performer artists second, with a smaller outlier in directorship and specialist, which says something. And what it says is that many of those in whom are performing and participating within the community of artistry have found themselves to be overwhelmingly experienced in all aspects, if not more than 1 or 2, and yet have yet to hit those points of board of directors, and as you can even see here, producers. So what is felt in the Tucson artistic community? How do these roles, responsibilities, and race, how does it affect those that are interacting within? One very important question was, do you feel that the Tucson performing arts community has made an effort to include you and other people of your racial or ethnic background? It's very pleasing to see that we had many respondents say yes, which again, I find falls into the homogeneity of what the Southwest represents. Since the Southwest has always been an area in which homogeneity had been, if not tacitly endorsed, it had been overwhelmingly influenced by the influx of those who come here and stay as well as those who are indigenous and who have been born here. But that's still not to mention that easily a third of that number say no. A third, 33 people out of the 108 respondents did not feel and still do not feel that the Tucson performing arts community has made an effort. So it just shows that while there are incredible gains from the programs that have been in place and are in place now, as well as the outreach, such as exposés and town halls of this nature, there's still a lot of work to do. And that a lot of work is also going to be coming from those who felt that strange mix of, yes, there are elements in which Tucson Performing Arts is inviting, and yet there are still areas in which it is not. And we'll find that in the 18 people that had put in sometimes. This is another very warming response to how we can go about what we're going to try and what we are doing as a community when it comes to uncovering innate or illicit biases in which are still prevalent within the community. Have you ever felt unwelcome or unwanted at an audition in Tucson because of your race, gender, and or identity held reasons that are beyond your control? And as I answer this, I'm going to answer a few questions that I see that have been popping up, but I would like to finish with this slide and I will be able to answer questions right after. What we see here is that very positively, we see a large number, a little over 60, by 63 people, felt no. There is no feeling of unwelcome or unwantedness. And yet, we still see a solid 40 respondents do feel that way. Now, that's going to be important to address in the next upcoming slides, in which I will go ahead and break down. But before I continue on, I want to make a very important special note that while the focus of this survey is on race and ethnicity due to much of the turmoil that has been going on throughout the country, it would be remiss for us to not describe or at least make mention of the other forms of discrimination that do occur or have felt to be occurring, such as gender identity discrimination that seems to have been shadowed and was elicited throughout the comment sections, primarily in specific cases of the respondents that they answered themselves. I would like to go ahead and begin answering some of the questions that I see popping up. And I see, what does playwright fall under? Playwright falls under, playwright fell under and falls under, excuse me, I do not want to overspeak the moderator. I see a number of people that would like to answer. I'm going to answer the questions that I see for me, Richard Thompson. Out of those who said yes, and I'm going to assume that it's yes in feeling unwelcome or unwanted at an audition, how many were white? Now, I want to be very clear when I do answer this question. That is a bit of a misnomer, because those that said yes not due to race primarily, and those numbers in which I have not put on this slide because of the particular focus of the town hall and the time that we have allotted. Those that did say yes were finding it under gender discrimination, sexism, ageism, and in some cases, disability. So while race was not the foremost factor for those who said yes while they were white, it was overwhelmingly women, and it was overwhelmingly in the realm of sexism and gender identity discrimination. That also needs to be given a hue, and that's why this is also not upon this particular slide or the particular focus of this study, because many of those respondents were also falling into the LGBTQTS category, which adds another layer that needs to be specifically addressed. I hope that answered the question, but please provide more, because I would always be happy to answer the ones that are asked. Now, how does one go about getting an executive director? That is a very good question. And while that question may have a slight bit of humor within it, the reality would be that those trying to get an executive directorship, like myself, may have difficulty in answering that question. And I cannot correlate that with race, but what I would correlate that with specifically is ability, or rather not ability, but the ability to have that role presented to them in the first place, not ability as in talent. I want to make sure that I clarify that. And so, like all things that are apparent, the idea of white privilege and the benefits therein may have a correlation into how those executiveships come about. That is something I cannot say for certain outside of anecdotal evidence. The next slide is going to be, do you feel that the shows and performances chosen in Tucson are an accurate reflection of your personal identity or racial ethnic background? This again is a very interesting answer, because as you'll see, a solid 30 people felt yes, it does. A solid 22 did not, but overwhelmingly, which marked over half, was sometimes. And that seems to be the prevailing aspect around the locality, which might have to do with the region of the Southwest itself. When it comes down to, there are areas and points in which are specifically addressed, but then there are others that go ignored. Now, those that are ignored may not be out of illicit bias or even malevolence. It may come out of simple negligence, unknowingness, and without the discussion to address them in the first place. There are things in which acts in which those are perpetuating do not realize that they are being harmful or hurtful while they are being done, even when they are being brought about from a place of sincere warmth. There are many times people hurt those at whom they love, not because they are wanting to, but because they don't know anything else but that. That is why this question is an important reminder for the necessity of conversations such as this. Real fears. Now, the two questions that we're going to be looking at next are incredibly important, not only because they're coming down to the root of how people feel, but because those feelings have been elicited not only thematically, in which I will talk about in the next section, but they are evidenced by actual external incidents. Please forgive the discoloration of the graph, but the importance behind it is not lost. Are you apprehensive to voice your concerns due to fear of backlash or losing future opportunities in the Tucson arts community? It's very nice it's very good to see that many know. I would want to clarify the confusion on this. The 54 on the left-hand side is no. 54 respondents do not have that apprehension. They did not feel that apprehension. 6 sometimes, but that 40, they do. That 40 people, those people there that responded in that manner are holding their voices back because out of lack of opportunity, lack of roles that are available, lack of the feeling of trust in the community to hear them as actual humans that have a point of contention that needs to be addressed, as opposed to a subculture that is merely complaining. That is prevalent not just here, not just within the artistic community, that is within the nation itself, and many would argue in the world. But this number right here, we should be heartened to see that 54 do not fear that backlash. I want to also emphasize that this number was not broken down by race. This was broken down by respondent. If we were going to start breaking down by race, there would be a much larger, much more complex, data-driven chart that a pie chart would only denigrate in its importance. The next question, do you feel that you have lost performance opportunities due to your race or ethnicity? It's good to see that in this case, of those that answered, which was less than the total respondent number, 3/4 of those that answered, a little under, about 59 people, felt no. Now, I can easily say that within that particular number, all ethnicities are advocated within that particular representation. In the yeses, it would be a much smaller subset of marginalized voices. The reason why I want to emphasize that, and I see a couple questions that I can specifically answer. The reason why I can answer, the reason that I will answer as soon as I finish explaining this chart, is that in the special notes in which I found from those that did not answer yes or no, I found specific terminology that is indicative of that feeling of loss of identity. Lost. Now that obviously was not a word that was placed into the word subset to choose. That was put in uniquely. And it is indicative of many of the other particular responses that did not say yes or no, but found a point of confusion because they felt there was a feeling of alienation within the community that they themselves do not feel a part of. That requires its own special study. But it does tell us one thing, that yes, while there are those that feel that they've lost opportunities, and there are those that don't feel that way, there are those that are so far removed in their own personal feelings that they do not even warrant being able to answer that question. And that is an area, in addition to being able to advocate for others, for whoever they are, is necessary. Because when one feels lost, they feel unseen. And if they feel unseen, they feel invisible. And there aren't people who feel invisible that feel like they can do anything. So of the question that I see, but how many of these are Native American and white? Native American was a term that was not necessarily put in. I could say specifically in the breakdown, there was 2, I believe. I have to go back and look. There was 2 or 1. And now that I'm thinking about it, absolutely, I believe it's 1. One respondent that had put in Native American and white, or rather indigenous and white. But that's not to say that there was not indigenous, Latina, Latinx, and white. And that is something that needs to be said. So in the biracial term, 1, but there were indigenous and triracial and in single ethnic background. If this question is asked in the future, maybe performance can be changed to artistic. Absolutely. I feel personally that many of the titles require a stricter, definitive guideline because we as artists, by inherency, flow through different mediums with our strengths and our weaknesses, but still with our intent in being able to commit to it. I would be very surprised if any one respondent here that has been in the artistic community for 0 to 45 years has not done at some point set breakdown or acting and performing, or even a little bit of directorship when they needed to because one of the other members weren't there, or producing. The roles themselves belie the greater issue at hand. Roles of leadership are nowhere near as high for those that are BIPOC or TGNC. And then, yes, how do I get a call back from the Gaslight Theater, even though I auditioned, but I feel like it's my weight? What do you think as an executive director? Does it have any criticism? What do you think as an executive director? Does it have any criticism with weight? It says more about them than it does about you. And I will say that not scientifically. I will say that because as a human being, if the first thing someone does is ignore you from something so facile as weight or skin color or hair color or gender or sex, it is not you that needs to carry that water. That's them carrying that water, trying to drown everyone else out.
If we could pause for just a moment. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If we could just regroup for a moment here, if everyone could just stay tuned, thank you. For time purposes, we are actually going to move directly into the testimonials. So we have some set readers that are designated to go ahead and start those. So if we can actually jump, Richard, in the testimonial section.
That's actually perfect timing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
The performing arts in Tucson has made no room for Indigenous performers. Where are the stories of us? Where are the theaters making an effort to show diversity and let Indigenous storytellers take the spotlight? The majority of theater in Tucson is white-centered or too concerned with boosting the gaslight, whose shows are, outside of being unfunny and lacking in talent or originality, are often offensive.
I have been working for years trying to bring theater with a Latinx influence to the stage and into schools that serve marginalized kids and families. We have made some great strides and have consistently brought BIPOC actors, characters, and bilingual stories to the community. It was such a huge slap in the face to read the AZ Star's welcome to a new artistic director in town. The company was praised for bringing an artistic director to Tucson who would highlight diverse cultures and show our community how inclusive theater can and should be. I agreed. That is admirable, and I am so happy for the person they chose because he is very talented and will bring great change. He already has. The problem was that this story painted a picture of a white savior coming to us Tucson natives to teach us how to program diverse theater as if no one had been doing that before. Diverse artists were unnoticed. No effort was given by this company to hire a native Tucsonan. Diversity was gifted to us by white people hiring and paying local funds to out-of-town artists. And the leader was to be a white man who wouldn't even live in our community. It continues to feel dirty, even though I admire this person and his organization's work and current efforts to be more inclusive. It feels like colonialism, where me and my fellow artists of color could not possibly have known how to create high enough caliber art until we were instructed by white people on how to do so. Our creation of diverse stories and art weren't even noticed until a white man was the leader with this idea. I am so glad for the allies who are now working so hard to listen and make change. I still see remnants of that white savior behavior as I sit in diversity and inclusion groups where white people are coming to save us from racism, as if we have to completely re-envision how we create theater in Tucson. Many theaters do have to do that, but they should also watch and listen to the BIPOC people who have already been doing local and diverse theater for many years, teaching and showing marginalized kids that they too can have theater.
I believe with the professional talent present and continuously working in this community and what the audiences are willing to come experience have advanced leaps and bonds and are well within the expectation of a progressive and open theatrical community within the reality of its environment. I have found no evidence to support that this community itself has made any attempt to silence any stories presented by minority storytellers. On the contrary, they are well supported. The only issue is a lack of those members within the community itself, and making pieces to tell those stories without the appropriate casts would be a disservice to our audience if not properly addressed.
I identify as Japanese, Asian, Mexican, and Caucasian American. I'm part of the third generation of an immigrant family that moved to the US from Nogales. I've lived in Tucson my entire life. I admit my Caucasian heritage offers me a degree of protection from racism that other persons of color do not have, and I have benefited from white privilege. Nevertheless, I have also experienced anti-Mexican and anti-Asian racism. Due to my mixed racial heritage, I often find myself an outsider. My racial features are too prominent for me to pass as wholly white, yet not prominent enough to pass as either of my other racial backgrounds. Therefore, I find it hard to be accepted in any group. I'm certain that I'm not the only person to experience this type of inclusion. In theater, there is little representation of people from mixed racial backgrounds. The stories we well tend to be either distinctly white or not white, with, as we know, the majority being white. However, people are more complex than that, and the stories we tell in our theaters ought to reflect that complexity. Even in conversations concerning racial reform in the performing arts, it is hard to find my experience represented. My voice and the voices of people like me are often discounted because we are not viewed as true persons of color. For example, one of the common solutions I've read regarding theater reform is to have performers only auditioned and be selected for roles that fit their racial features. Creating reform around racial presentation is dangerous. It easily leads to racial profiling and discounts the lived experiences of people who may not pass as the public conception of a certain race. I hope we keep this in mind during our conversations. Our solutions need to dig deeper beyond binary definitions of race. We need to reform the performing arts that is as multifaceted as the performers.
One time I was asked to make a character Mexican with an accent and everything to make him funny. The fact that this person thought the joke is to be Mexican was horrible. I dropped out after that was asked of me. This person never felt welcome and doesn't think they want to pursue performing any longer.
I am biracial, black and white, but I present white. My experience has come when playing Black women. I was cast as the Mammy character, and I was asked to darken my skin because I was the same shade as the children. Going to the press photo shoot at the photographer's house was very uncomfortable. The photographer was a Black man, and here I was in his home darkening my skin. I have been asked in auditions, "What are you?" I have been asked to make my hair more ethnic. Basically, I am cast as Black characters, but then told that I am not Black enough. One theater company only reached out to me when they had a Black character that needed to be cast. I brought that to their attention, that I was tired of being the token. They said they were worried about that. I have not heard anything from them since. Even though it might take roles away from me, I want my theater community to do better and find Black presenting artists for these roles as well. It is always an internal struggle playing a Black character because I'm so light-skinned, especially when playing the Mammy or Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother. I acknowledge that I have possibly taken space away from darker-skinned actors, and I will do better as well.
I was bullied by a director at a local theater about 8 years ago. I did not report this bullying because it was my first role in Tucson, and I did not want to be labeled as uncooperative. If this were to happen to me today, you can bet I would speak out. And to be honest, there's a cast member who had the artistic director's ear. This person went to the artistic director and reported what was going on. The artistic director did nothing. This white male director chose me as the cast member to pick upon throughout the entire rehearsal process. I know that some directors do this, but it had never happened to me before. And in fact, I had never seen it happen in any show that I was involved in. If I was standing, I should be sitting. If I was sitting, I should be standing, even if I was doing the exact blocking that the director gave me. I made the decision that whatever he said, I would cooperate without objecting, no matter how ridiculous. I knew that he was trying to get a rise out of me, and I refused to take the bait. He kept upping the ante and eventually told me I looked too masculine to play the role I was cast in. I'm a hetero female and was playing a hetero female role. That one really hurt, and I remember thinking, damn, you're good. He really seemed determined to break me. The straw that almost broke the camel's back was during Tech Week, when he gave me a note to buy light makeup because my skin was too dark. My mouth literally fell open. I couldn't believe he had said it. I replied evenly that my skin is the same color and that even when the artistic director chose me to play the role, he dropped it. It was honestly the most miserable experience of my life, and I've had a lot of theater experience.
Hello, I am a theater tech and performer that got their start in Tucson, Arizona. I am one of hundreds, but I don't see many people of color, female, or other identifying techs and performers around me. Arizona in general seems to be stuck in an era where all techs and designers are men, and most leads and casts in plays are white and heterosexual, which is frankly outrageous to me when we live in a state and city where most performers are of color and other creeds. It disgusts me when I walk into a show and see in the credits that most of the people that worked on the show are white and hetero-identifying. Our city is much more colorful and diverse than what our theater community puts out. I don't want to have to go to Borderlands to feel seen. I don't want to go see a Gaslight show and see mostly white workers, techs, and performers. All theaters in Tucson should reflect the vast array of talent, colors, sexes, identities, and physical abilities in every aspect of a show. There's no excuse for the obvious racism, sexism, ableism, and LGBT phobia. So I personally am done with theaters that aren't fully inclusive. I am done with companies that have less than half of the techs and designers be female. I am done with seeing my friends that are differently colored or differently physically able be overlooked. All Tucson theaters need to change, period.
For one of the shows I worked on, I noticed that from everyone in the cast to director, producers, and even backstage tech, I was the only person of color. We were working on a show that typically doesn't have people that look like me portray these characters, and for that, I felt that throughout the whole process of the show, I was constantly picked on by the director. Nothing I did would satisfy this director, and it felt at times it was due to race because I was the only person of color in the cast. Everyone in the cast was awesome. The backstage tech crew was great, and the costume set design were super respectful, and so were the show producers. It was hard to feel welcomed into this type of show from the way the director was treating me. You try to give people the benefit of the doubt that this has nothing to do with race. Maybe it was my lack of experience, but constant remarks and no positive feedback or suggestions on what to fix made it feel like I did not fit the director's vision of the show because of what I looked like. Nothing would satisfy this director, and even when the show debuted and we had a decent performance, everyone got compliments, and I ended up getting criticized for a very minimal wardrobe malfunction. The only thing that kept me enjoying the show was the awesome group of individuals that were my castmates. The type of characters in the show were represented not only originally look like me, so that was hard enough. Having a director that makes you feel like you don't belong there constantly makes it a lot more difficult. Perhaps I was only hired because the producers liked me or to show that the company had diversity. If I was treated like this because of the color of my skin, I would have much rather preferred not to get cast at all. Due to this, I'm discouraged to ever audition or work with that company ever again. My love for this art form will keep me auditioning and seeking involvement elsewhere in Tucson. But for now, this is one less opportunity in this small town for me and my fellow people of color.
The Tucson art community is amazing. It is why I moved here, in part. I appreciated the collaborative and non-competitive nature of the scene here. As an outsider artist, indie non-degree holding, I have always felt welcomed, but have often felt that the larger institutions here have major barriers to entry. My race is one part of that. For instance, early on, as a young person of color, single mother, I applied to be part of a residency with MOCA. I asked some questions about childcare and etc., and was told that was not an option and that I could not bring my child. Eventually a spot opened up and I was told I could come, but needed to find childcare for my 1-year-old. Luckily, I was able to do that, but with much financial costs and very last minute. As a 27-year-old single sex worker mom, that was hard, but I figured it out. In hindsight, that is just one example of extreme hurdles I managed to be part of the art scene. I have written numerous grants through the years, and almost all of them have been declined in spite of very topical and political content. Certainly, I can assume some of these have been declined based on merit, but I watched many of my white colleague grant applications be accepted while mine were refused. I don't attribute all of that to racism, but I do think it plays a part, more than we would like it to. I got tired of trying to apply for grants, especially such small grants that required so many hours of labor, to be refused again and again. I know the quality of my work, and I have a solid track record of producing quality work. I was often trying to bring together Black, Indigenous, people of color, femme, non-binary, women artists, and finding no support. I turned to funding my projects myself. I have a lot to say about this topic, but find myself overwhelmed in this time and space. My work has always centered marginalized voices, gender and race conscious casting, radical hospitality, sliding scale tickets, and social commentary. But I'm also an educator who has been facilitating social justice and anti-racism and anti-oppression workshops and trainings for 20 years. This has never been a side issue for me, but I have over and over again felt the resistance against bringing these issues into the performing arts world, in Tucson and everywhere else. I will say that I find the Tucson performing arts community interested in general in this work, but that does not erase the lack of funding, barriers to entry, and institutional and audience buy-in. My experience in the Tucson arts community has been generally hard, but good. However, the people in power are mostly white, and I have dealt with questions around my race on a daily basis. I know these are often just curious, in good faith questions, but are repeated so often it's exhausting. I have too many times had to try and manage white cis male space owners or managers or techs belittling or angry. I have watched white-led shows be supported and welcome, while person of color fronted shows have been made to jump through so many hoops. I have witnessed white-led institutions trying to center person of color voices and having those events underattended, push off to off-peak hours, or otherwise marginalized. It isn't anyone's personal fault, it's systemic. And the change we need to see is at a cultural, systemic, and institutional level.
As a biracial husband and wife-owned nonprofit ballet school, we have experienced many issues. Our school is totally inclusive for anyone that wants to learn the art of classical ballet, no matter their size, color, shape, age, or economic level. We have found that sometimes the biggest barrier to learning the art of ballet can come from the immediate family, such as ballet is only for skinny, white, rich children. If my students take ballet, they will lose their cultural identity. While my child can't pursue the arts after high school, they have to get a job and support the family. I want my child to attend a school where everyone is the same skin tone. I don't believe in interracial marriages and don't want my children seeing that example. We have experienced a swastika graffiti left on our front door of our business. We have experienced lack of support because our studio was not Black enough, whatever that means. Until the BLM protests started, then all of a sudden everyone recognized us as Black-owned business, but that has faded away. As a woman, I am constantly not being recognized as co-founder director with my husband. One example of this is our students were performing at a women's conference, and when our school was introduced, they only mentioned my husband's name because we continue to see that the male as in charge. I think we need to address our own bias within the arts community. For example, because I don't have the ballerina body, I was very anorexic when I was dancing. My own knowledge and ability is constantly being challenged as a teacher and a director. We need to stop judging our professionals on their appearance or their academic training. The qualities for being a good teacher, director, has nothing to do with your performing career. Some of the greatest dancers make horrible teachers, directors. You have to completely change your mindset. The performance brain is partially about self-absorption, striving to give the audience the best performance that you can achieve. Teaching is about giving that knowledge and passion for the art to the next generation, encouraging a lifelong love of arts. My husband was the first Black male classical ballet dancer from Tucson in his career. He auditioned the Dance Theatre of Harlem in New York City in the 1980s and was told that he was too classical for that company. From a Black-owned and all-Black ballet company. He auditioned for a Jewish man, Elliot Feld. He was Baby John in West Side Story, Feld Ballet New York, Ballet Tech now, who hired him in 1989. Elliot had a very diverse ballet company back then. If we really want to talk about inclusion as artists, we need to take a hard look in the mirror and ask what are my own biases about others. For example, why can't the ballet Giselle or Swan Lake be performed by all ballet dancers regardless of their skin tone as a classical ballet for its technique and beauty? Why can't Misty Copeland be seen as a ballet dancer, not a Black ballet dancer?
All right, that is the conclusion of our data results as well as our testimonies. So I want to thank every single person who submitted something to that and was able to make themselves vulnerable enough to share some very incredible and at times heart-wrenching stories with us. I do want to take a moment to address that we saw several testimonies that included the gaslight, and we had a few questions that came through regarding the gaslight, and just want to acknowledge that we don't have a representative of the gaslight here with us this evening, and any response that we offered in response to the questions that were asked should not be held as an official response because we have not worked with them. Those of us responding have not worked with them, and just wanted to make that clear that if you have any concerns with them, you are free to connect with them, and we will also pass along this feedback to them directly. That being said, we do have some other, you can see from the slide, if you have any other follow-up questions or comments, you can connect to us at tucsonartstownhall@gmail.com. We are not done. We still have quite a bit of our evening left. I want to introduce myself real fast. My name is China Young. I'm one of our organizers. We have several other organizers here with us today. If you will all, we can stop the screen share for just a moment and introduce ourselves. If you would all come on the screen and join me. Thank you, wonderful. So Mara, if you would like to start as our lovely moderator.
Hello, everyone. I am a local performer in the Tucson community. I'm also new to the area. Very grateful to have you all here. Thank you.
Dennis? Oh, you're muted, my dear. You're muted.
So sorry. My name is Dennis Tamblin. I'm the general manager for Southern Arizona Performing Arts Company, but here as an organizer, but also if there's any SAPAC directed questions, I will be here to take those as well. Thank you all so much for coming.
And we have Carly.
Hi, I'm Carly Preston, Tucson native performer, one of the organizers and also a representative of the Rogue.
Alexis.
Hi, I'm Alexis George. I am a local and a performer. I am also a graduate student at NYU for art politics.
Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal Stark. I'm a local performer and music teacher and voice educator in the Tucson area.
Matt.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Holter. I'm also a performer and director in town and also a educator for over 20 years and working with Tucson Unified.
Richard.
Hi, my name is Richard Chomps Thompson, and I am a local performer and artist, and I came here a little bit late, and I like to give my opinion, so I want to make sure that that was my opinion all alone. So thank you guys very much for listening to me.
Chanel, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear. Hi, I'm Chanel Bragg. I am a native Arizonan, but new to the Tucson theater family by proxy of Arizona Theater Company. And I am the moderator in the comments if anyone would like to share anything. And I'm also one of the organizers.
And we do have a number of other panelists. Several are hidden. So I'm just going to introduce by organization, and you can introduce your name. Arizona Opera.
Hi, I'm Joe Spector. I'm the President and General Director of Arizona Opera, and it's great to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. Arizona Repertory Theatre.
Hi there, my name is Hank Stratton. I am the Artistic Director at the Arizona Repertory Theatre at the School of Theatre, Film, and Television at the University of Arizona.
Thank you. And you guys don't have to disappear after you introduce yourselves. Just Arizona Rose Theatre. Oh, you're quiet, Brandon.
I'm Brandon Howell. I'm the Managing Director of the Arizona Rose Theatre.
Arizona Theatre Company.
Hi there, I'm Sean Daniels. I'm the Artistic Director of Arizona Theatre Company, and I just want to give a thank you to everyone that has put in so much work to make this important conversation happen.
Thank you so much. Let's see, Arts Express.
Hey there, my name is Ben Weiss. I'm the Director of Communications and Assistant Producer for Arts Express, and we're happy to be a part of this.
Thank you. Borderlands Theatre Company. Oh, you're quiet.
Thanks for that. Hi, I'm Milt Ortiz, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Thatre and Yaqui land. I co-run Borderlands Theatre with...
I'm Mark David Pinate, Producing Artistic Director.
Thank you both, and thank you for that land acknowledgement. Dancing in the Streets.
Hi, my name is Celeste Lipu.
My name is Joseph Rogers.
And we're the co-founders and co-artistic directors for Dancing in the Streets, Arizona, nonprofit ballet school in South Tucson.
Thank you. Invisible Theater.
Whoops, let me do. Hi, I'm Susan Clausen, Managing Artistic Director of Invisible Theater. I think I tipped the scale because I've been working over 45 years in this community.
Thank you so much. A Live Theater Workshop.
Hi there, my name is Michael Martinez, and I am the Executive Director at Live Theater Workshop. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Old Pueblo Playwrights.
My name is Dave Zinke. I'm Secretary of the Old Pueblo Playwrights. I've been around for 30 years and involved in local theater for the last 16 or so.
Great. And Scoundrel and Scamp.
I am Brian Falcone, Artistic and Managing Director at the Scoundrel and Scamp, and also on the board at the Rogue Theatre.
Hi, I'm Claire Mantle, Associate Artistic Director of the Scoundrel and Scamp Theatre and an instructor at UA.
Thank you. The Rogue Theatre.
Hi, I'm Cindy Meyer. I'm the managing and associate artistic director at the Rogue and also co-founder of the Rogue. And Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe McGrath. I'm one of the co-founders of the Rogue Theater and artistic director.
Unscrewed Theater.
Hi, my name is Chris Seidman, and I am Executive Director of Unscrewed Theater, Tucson's first original theater for improv comedy. And I know how I got to be Executive Director was I just spent the most time here. So they made me Executive Director.
And for free. No, I'm just kidding. And Winding.
Yeah, volunteer.
Yes. Winding Road Theater Ensemble.
Hi, I'm Maria Caprile from Winding Road Theater Ensemble. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight.
Thank you. So we have a huge representation here of leadership, and thank you all so much for attending. We have actually spent several months talking to these leaders and keeping them on track with our own process and getting to this night. So thank you all so much for your dedication and time and support in this conversation. At this time, we were going to take a bio break. Do people feel like we need to take like a 3-minute bio break, or do we just want to plow forward? Just plow forward? Okay, great. We're just going to keep going forward. So we want to invite the leadership to respond either to the things that they heard or offer the community any plans that they are currently undertaking for themselves in terms of action towards stronger BIPOC representation within our Tucson stages. I do want to offer Susan Klassen. Let's start with Susan, if that's all right with everyone else, and then we'll go through for everyone else.
Thank you, China. Thanks, everybody. Both all the organizers and certainly all the participants and everyone who wrote those honest and really wrenching anecdotal experiences. I appreciate each and every one. Having been here a very, very long time, I've seen the theater community go through enormous changes. Certainly, I have seen Invisible Theater evolve over the decades, and we continue to evolve. We have instituted a 5-month workshop process with Ashley LaRussa on addressing very important issues with both, or actually with Invisible Theater Board, our staff, with artists who have auditioned, those who have gotten cast, and those who haven't, to make sure that we are building upon our history, but never stopping, and also moving forward and being aware and being allies, and also being a welcoming venue for all to tell their stories in their way. So thank you so much to everyone. It's a privilege to be a part of this community.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Susan. So I guess at this time, if panelists, if you are ready to speak, just raise your hand and then we can go down the line that way. I think that will be the easiest using the hand raise feature.
Can I just say, I had another meeting, pushed it back as far as I could, so I'm sorry I can't stay longer. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or comments on anything having to do, I guess, with anything. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much. Yes, Celeste and Joey. Can we unmute?
There you go.
So I want to just sort of offer one voice that wasn't really in there, is that many times, and we're Native Tucsonians, that indigenous cultures and many other cultures have really not wanted their stories represented or told by anybody outside of their own culture. So as directors, we're limited to what kind of ballets we can produce. We have approached and asked many different cultures about doing collaboration, but it's always been seen and met with kind of hostility as wanting to collaborate with non-specific, you know, we're not Mexican, we're not indigenous, although we're mixed race. That's been sort of a barrier for presenting work to the public. And the other thing is that when people are auditioning for roles, I don't necessarily, for us as directors, we cast people that are going to work hard, show up on time, listen to instruction, and be engaged. A lot of times there are people or students that show up and they want the roles, but they don't want to put in the work and they don't want to make any sacrifices. So we just kind of wanted to offer that perspective from directors that that's some of the things that we deal with.
Great. Thank you so much for that input. Sean Daniels.
Hi there. I just wanted to thank everybody for the work that they put into this. And I think we all know how crucial this conversation is. So I'm sure people have seen, we already announced our digital season, which is half created by BIPOC artists, and our main stage season, which 4 out of the 7 shows is written by BIPOC artists. And I know that this is a shift for us as an organization. And I think I really appreciated just hearing the facts of it, because I think it really gives us a sense of strength also moving forward as these are difficult conversations. And this is culture change, right? From the top to bottom. You know, we also recently added 2 board members of color and a senior staff member of color. And that I think is where the real change will happen in our organization, to be honest. I think programming is one thing, but ultimately board leadership is where organizations are set. And that is ultimately where the direction of places go. So, you know, we're early in this. I also just want to make myself available, and I imagine that Chanel would do the same, to artists that want to continue this conversation afterwards, that our emails are very easy to find, and we would love to keep this conversation going. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I do want to acknowledge a few questions we have coming through. One general question is about where to find this recording after this event. It is being broadcast currently to Arizona Arts page, their Facebook page, and that will be available after the recording, and we will also have access to it that we will release from the Tucson Arts Town Hall group. We do have a list of, if you registered, we do have your email addresses, so we will send that information in a follow-up email after this event. Are there any other arts leaders that have any specific responses to the material this evening, or to what your plans of action are for the future of your organization? Everyone is silent.
I think Cynthia has her hand up.
Who is that? I don't see anyone's hand up.
Cindy Meyer.
Oh, Cindy, sorry, Cindy, you have your physical hand up. I'm not.
It's okay. I should have put up my the digital hand.
It's all right.
I mostly just had a response to the stories that were shared. Of course, we're all storytellers, and we respond as human beings to stories. And I just really want to commend everyone who shared their stories about their experiences, because I believe that's how change takes place. And it's through those sharing of stories and talking with each other that change really begins to happen, and we really change people's minds. And so my major response to this evening is just to say thank you, and to please keep sharing your stories in whatever context or whatever way that you can, because they're extremely powerful and they really make us think differently about the world. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And Claire Mantel's going to join me here too in our response. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to listen. And I think a lot of what we've been trying to do as an organization in the last few months is to do a lot of listening, and this just gave us a lot more things to think about in the process. Part of what we're doing this season, we decided to join a festival called the Jubilee, which I'd encourage other theater companies to take a look at too. It's a wonderful opportunity to work to represent the voice of underrepresented in the season, in the programming. And so what we did this season is we are committed to doing over 50% of our shows to try to tell stories outside of the mainstream of the United States. And our goal going forward is to continue to grow that, that diversity. And then also we're taking a long, hard look at our casting processes, trying to figure out in what ways have we bought in unintentionally to traditional casting practices. Do we have going through the casting process too? And I think Claire is going to share some more on that as well.
Yeah, so we are very excited, and we realize that through programming work from underrepresented voices, we started to see our spaces open up to new faces and new people, which was really, really encouraging. So we're very excited to be doing a work by a Black playwright, a work by a trans playwright, Latinx playwright, women. So we know we have more work to do. We are listening, we are learning, and we are really taking a good hard look at what we do and what we perpetuate, and trying to pick all of that apart so that we can do better.
And just one last thought, the anecdote about the challenge of being biracial and finding representation in plays really struck home for me. I said, amen is what I chatted to Claire as we were listening in. I think that's something we want to good look at too, is how do we look at plays that actually show blended people, because the world is not binary, as we all know. Thanks.
Thank you both so much for that. Chris Seidman from Unscrewed Theater, you have your hand up.
Yes. I wanted to just start off by thanking the organizers of this event to bring us all together. I think that it's certainly something that needs to be addressed, and doing it as a community is really the only way that we can look forward as a group of artists. So thank you for doing that. I also wanted to thank the people who provided the testimonials. I think that it was a very wide-ranging view of experience, and certainly was food for thought. We, as an organization, have been discussing diversity basically since we've opened our doors, because in the world of improv comedy, if you're not aware, it's pretty white. And so we've always discussed ways to bring other voices and other experiences into the world of improv comedy, and we will continue to do that. What we've done over the summer, since we have not been performing in person, is we've been performing on Zoom every Saturday night for the last 25 weeks. And what we found is that offers the opportunity to bring in improvisers from all over the country, particularly BIPOC improvisers. We've worked with a group called the Black Improv Alliance from Miami, and we've brought in instructors from Austin, Texas. And so we are aware that in the world of improv, we need to highlight and listen to BIPOC voices. So we will continue to do that internally. We will have internal discussions, and we are very much ready to listen and do better.
Awesome, thank you so much. Joe Spector, There's an Opera. I understand that some of you have been raising your physical hands, and I'm so sorry. These videos, I lose everyone to a film strip. So thank you for your patience.
I think, well, first of all, thank you for that. And, you know, considering we had no rehearsal time for this town hall, I think this is working out just great. I want to say thank you to the organizers for this event, to my fellow colleagues for being here, for all the people that participated in providing testimonials and answering the survey. I want to just share everyone's viewpoint that this is a critical conversation. And I think that it's coming at a time when in the field of opera in particular, there hasn't ever been before more opportunity to share stories that that in a generation ago would have been unrecognizable in our field, which has been certainly exclusive of voices of color in the past. And so even though Arizona Opera and Reeds and Seasons has been able to present pieces that express more diverse communities like Maria de Buenos Aires or Charlie Parker's Yardbird, or Fellow Travelers, at the same time, it was only 5 years ago that it was major news in the New York Times that Otello, the Verdi opera at the Met, was not going to be performed in blackface. And so we take our role as a regional company incredibly seriously in terms of advancing this dialogue as best we can, and at the same time acknowledging complete humility that there is a really long way to go in our field and within our organization in particular. Arizona Opera will be bringing on an EDI consultant to help us think through the ways in which we approach our policies. And we're proud that we'll be presenting our first civic practice-oriented project later this fall, which we'll be announcing soon. I think if there is a silver lining to all of this, it's that the crisis, which is taxing all of us so heavily right now, has become a catalyst for discussion that I think is overdue and might not have happened in as concentrated a way. And I just want to say how grateful I am to be part of this conversation, and that I look forward to being part of it going forward.
Thank you so much, Joe. Milta, you have had your hand up several times and I have not seen it, and everyone's telling me. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something to what Brian was saying, is the need for representation for people of color. I'm in a BIPOC group at the National New Play Network. And within that group, in a smaller group, we've been having a discussion about casting people in roles that are not necessarily, it's a standard white play, and then we cast a BIPOC person, and so therefore now it's a diverse play. And that is another way of erasing a person or not being seen, because part of that person is not on stage. And I think what people are wanting to see when they want to see themselves reflected is to see their whole self, the way that they live their lives, the way that they express, the way that they talk, and so different things. So I think that that's also a really important part of the conversation, is to have something that is of the culture, with the culture, for the culture, and everyone else along with that. Just the same way that I go see all types of plays. I don't just see Latinx plays. And so I've just been thinking a lot about that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Milta. And just to step out of turn for a moment, I want to echo that with lots of snaps and hurrahs, because I recently was in a workshop where we discussed that exact thing, how you have to go into these communities to be guests in them before you can expect them to come into your community to be a guest or even be on your own stage. So thank you for that very much. Michael Martinez.
Hi, thank you so much to everybody for all these wonderful stories that, they're heart-wrenching, and everyone's being very vulnerable, and I really appreciate this conversation a lot. Something that has always drawn me to theater is the ability for theater to kind of unite disparate communities by telling unique and diverse stories. And what we're really interested in at Live Theater Workshop is how you counter that against what we see as a very homogenous and elite audience space, and the lack of access to theater. We've tried to counter that, but not really in a strategic way. So it's really great to hear these stories because it helps further our conversations. We've hired a consultant to help us really define our strategies and our policies as an organization to be more inclusive and to reach out more, and also make sure that this type of work continues with our organization even after the people who are really interested in this type of work are no longer there. So thank you so much for these raw stories. It's, you know, my staff is here and my board is here, and understanding these stories is really the first part, and we're really interested in listening to that and becoming better at what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Joe McGrath, did you have your hand physically up at some point? Nope, that wasn't you. Okay, I see your face saying no. Celeste and Joey, you are up again.
Yeah, hello everyone. I want to say this. I'm gonna put it out there. In the Black community in Tucson, performing arts is a hard sell. I don't make, as we know on the ballet end, it's a hard sell. The reason being is because they don't see themselves as like on the stage, especially in Tucson. I mean, they heard of Misty Copeland, you know, this and that, but until they actually see it in Tucson on the stage, that's when they're going to change their minds. I mean, go ahead.
I think in the ballet world, we have a little different world than the theater world, because ballets are about universal things: love, betrayal, hate, death. You know, those are universal to human beings. And the art of ballet is a technique. You can learn the technique and you can learn the artistry. And that's not about any culture. It's about the art of moving and telling a story without words. So I think ballet world is a little different. We do have barriers, but in terms of our school, when we're casting a ballet, we're saying we're casting a ballet just because this performer has something extra to present to the audience, not what they look like. We go out of our way to make sure that people feel comfortable in our school, but we have had a lot of pushback saying that ballet should not be taught because it takes
because
away
of the
identity.
color of their skin, because basically they don't see a Black ballerina, or here we go, the macho thing when it comes to boys and fathers. It's a mindset. And some fathers just don't want their kids to
feel that ballet is
the way. They try to go the path of playing football, basketball, soccer, what have you. You know, so I mean, like I said, I'm gonna say it again, and even the Mexican community, it's a hard sell, because we're, after 13 years with the dance industry, we're still trying to convince ballet is the
that our art form is accessible to anybody.
Anyone, yeah. Absolutely.
I think one of the other interesting things about the ballet world is that for us, homosexual community has just been part of ballet and dance in general. So it's surprising to us to hear so many stories of performers that are feeling left out.
Yeah.
Sexuality in the dance world has been there from day one.
It's
one of the safe places for the gay, lesbian
community. Absolutely.
I see that Richard, one of our panelists, has his hand up, and then after Richard speaks, we do have a question I'd like to address to art leaders and see if anyone wants to respond. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, China. And just a response to that well thought out and said point. It was something that was just actually posed to me from my own my pops, and he was talking about my sister. My sister's into engineering, and as I am as well. But he had made a comment saying, "Yeah, but your sister doesn't really act that black," and it was striking to me because he's an engineer at IBM for 27 years, and I was going to go back to him saying, "Well, how black is that?" And the reality is that we have these conceptions of race, gender, identity, stereotype that we want to say we want to get past, but at the same time we hold on to for whatever traditionalist aspect. And the reality is, why couldn't someone who wants to go and wear socks up to her ankle or to her thighs or whatever and wear Invader Zim clothes be considered black as well as anything else? We're putting on these weird cultural parameters that have a historic basis. But what is growth? Growth is expansion. Growth is becoming who you're going to be, and especially in a homogenous community. When we learn from one another and we learn more about our neighbors, the things in which we were beholden to by tradition are the things that are meant to be grown past. And so the same kind of things that are holding us back, ideology, like as you were saying in dance, that it's going to be difficult to try to persuade others into getting out of a mindset of what something is supposed to be. I would always like to use the example that last year I got to be in one of the awesomest shows, Stupid Effin' Bird. And I played a character named Trigorin, who, if you know me, is very strangely very similar to me. And I will say Trigorin was never once mentioned by the color of his skin. And Trigorin wasn't written to be a black character. And yet I played as them because I was the character. And I think that if we are able to slowly and bit by bit address the real things that are holding us back into who we can be as an identity and how we can represent ourselves for who we are, ballet, theater, film, or whatever, then we are not only addressing the hard questions, but we're actually applying them into our lives, and we get to actually grow. Because it's that tradition that's holding us back. Like my pops, who always wants the best for me, saying in almost a very derogatory way that my sister, who has a very similar color scheme as me, is not acting enough. And that seems to be the thing that we want to try to grow past. Don't know exactly how to do it, but I think by talking about it, by addressing it, will help us grow from it.
Thank you. Absolutely. And that's absolutely the goal, right? we have to break these molds. So a question that was posed to our Q&A is for all leaders, and if you have a response, please raise your hand, the little blue hand, not your physical hand, because I can't track your physical hands as easily. But as arts leaders, how do you identify content that supports the diversity goals of your organization? Anyone have any thoughts on that? I know many of you addressed some of what you're doing right now. But how do you access the content that you find and that you ultimately choose? Oh, Maria, no, I said not your actual hand. I said your little blue hand. No, go ahead, Maria. I see you now.
I know you said that, China.
Don't have that.
I don't have it. I don't see it here. I don't.
No, it's not available.
It's not there.
It's not available.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that Winding Road, had our next season all planned, of course, as everybody does, far in advance. And then when we decided to go to an online season, we were not able to do any of the shows that we had planned to do. So I decided that what I was going to do was do an all original season. And because with all unpublished plays, and because Black Lives Matter was happening right at that time, it was really in my forefront of my mind to find some playwrights of color and do some of their work. So I went to, because I was looking for original works, I went to New Playwright Exchange, and they had a list of all of their Black playwrights, and I just started reading. And I read so many incredible plays, and we are doing one of them this season, Breathe Me In by Rachel Annette, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful play. I hope you guys will all check it out. And it's not cast yet, so keep watching Winding Road for an audition notice. And I recommend New Play Exchange for hearing new voices.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria. Milta or Mark?
There's so much to say about this topic, and I'll try to really keep it as brief as possible. But just some of the thoughts that are coming forth as I've experienced the presentation and heard the different responses is that I just want to, as somebody that inherited a company started by a white man, right? Barclay Goldsmith, many of us know him, ran it for 27 years. The board of directors, right, just hired me. He retired and they hired a person of color, multi-generational Arizonan, indigenous, Mexican American, Chicano. And it made a huge difference, right? Barclay himself has told me, as much as he, and folks that know Barclay, he's a big ally to the Latinx community. But like he even told me himself, he says, Mark, you're gonna get more access to those communities than I ever did. And it's very true. I mean, I know what work they did before I got there and in the last 7 years. And even myself, being who I am, how I look, when I go into Barrio Anita back in 2017, 2016, I mean, it took me a year for them to trust me. And I come from the same background, right? But folks who have generation upon generation been traumatized, right, historically, through oppression and white supremacy, they're not going to trust outsiders, right? And so the investment that needs to be put in by theaters, if you really want to make a shift, is tectonic, right? I mean, it is huge. It's going to take many years, but like, one of the comments you read, it's like, we would do more shows with people of color, but there's just not actors. That's the worst excuse, right? That's blaming brown people for not, being skilled and making yourselves available, right? Well, I think these summer youth programs, they need to happen in South Tucson. They need to be free. They need to be totally subsidized. These ones that cost several $100s to go for a month and do all the cool things that you do in theater, it all needs to be free, and they ought to be in South Tucson, and and working with kids in junior high and high school, and creating a group of designers and actors from locally that in 10 years from now are going to be graduating from the U of A or maybe other places and are going to come back the way I came back. I lived in the Bay Area for 20 years. I went to DePaul, got my MFA, and then I came back to make something happen in where I'm from, in my ancestral homelands. And so I think your artistic director hiring a person of color, right? A lot of organizations, baby boomers started and are getting to that retirement age. And I really hope as artistic directors start to retire out, like how Barclay did, that you're gonna look, your board is gonna really look for a person of color, a woman of color, a trans, people of color, that, I mean, and then, yeah, as Sean said, It's also about the board of directors, but it's also about the patrons, right? Your subscribers. Like those are people that weren't part of this conversation. But, you know, I just watched the Kansas City Chiefs, right, get booed at the first NFL game for locking arms in solidarity with Black Lives Matters, and all the fans booed them. And I just wonder, right, like how willing are the people that come to these shows that have been coming from traditionally, historically white organizations, how willing are they to see these different shows, right? And working, you know, to shift in those current patrons, but also to bring in the patrons of color. Like I said, it's a long investment. And like what China said, what you said earlier, is you have to go into their communities. You have to, I'm trying to work with DACA recipients. Again, not that far from my background, right? But I realized like my first move is not even about, hey, can we make a project together? It's like, what do you need? What can I do not to have any benefit to Borderlands, but for you? And that turned out to be a creative writing workshop to process all the craziness that was going on with the Supreme Court ruling that came out in June. But I'm not using those stories to make a play out of it. It's just, I got the resources. I found a really great instructor that's from their community, from LA, and we put that together just for them. And now we're getting to a point a year later where we're starting to talk about a possible collaboration. But it's slow, and it has to come from the heart, and having people of color in your leadership, your top positions, is key to all that.
And I also think is trusting an unrecognized BIPOC playwright and putting on that play with BIPOC artists would be awesome if it was BIPOC artists from the community, and also having access, like having an outreach person that's on the ground going to all these events to build that audience. Because you want to know why Latinos don't go to theater? Because their stories are not on stage. We can't just cast a Latina actor and say, it's about you. No, it's not, because they know when they recognize themselves. And I know that some people are not the stereotypical Latinx and all that, but most people that don't go to theater, it's because they haven't seen themselves reflected. Latinos, if I'm going to generalize, it's because they have not seen themselves reflected. And it's not for them. I'm not going to get anything out of going there. I can just watch TV, right? But if it's about that community, if it's speaking to the people, I bet your mariachi play was really successful because people love mariachi here, and that's what they do. It's very Mexican here. I'm Salvadoran. I'm not the majority here, but I understand that it's very Mexican, and in those little nuances make a difference, I think, in getting that audience. And it is going to take years, but if we really want to shift, we have to commit to that. And that's what I mean when I say by, for, and with. We have to work with our local actors. That's very, very important. And I think that will bring family and friends and all of that. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
And I would also just, like, final comment is, like, as far as Latinx stories, that's the only thing I feel qualified to speak about, but they can't be like making a story about Latin people in another country 150 years ago. That's not who we are, right? I really want to see brown, indigenous looking people on stages, not white presenting Latinx folks that look very European, which I constantly see. And I want to see the stories about what's happening right now, right here in our state, in our region, in our country. Not, I mean, Anna in the Tropics, love it, you know, but it's about this aristocratic family that basically owns a plantation and are very white presenting Cubans. And that's not the Latinos that live here, right? And that's not their stories. That's still a European story, right? So we have to tell the stories and show the people what they look like, what Mexicans look like here in Tucson. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you both very much. To hear from someone we haven't heard from, Brandon Howell, you have your hand raised. We'd love to bring you in.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we've got you.
I'm late in saying this, but I really I want to thank the organizers for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. Not only because of the stories that we heard from the community, but also because of what I'm hearing from the panel. I think it's very powerful hearing from other arts leaders and your perspectives. And we are dedicated to really listening and learning and growing from this process. We have always in the past asked our question, are we an inclusive organization? And we're really shifting that question to how can we be a more inclusive organization, and what can we do to make people feel more welcome. And so we're looking at, our entire process from auditions. We're looking at our programming. We are stretching what we have done in the past. Our next production coming up in October is Disgraced by Ayed Akhtar. And we're trying to broaden the programming that we are offering as an organization. But we really are starting with learning and listening from this process. So I can't express enough how much I appreciate everything that I've heard tonight.
Thank you so much. So good to hear from you as well. We have one last question. There's a few other questions that are through here or have come through a Q&A. One is pretty specific, so I'm going to ask it. It says the testimonial that mentioned the white savior complex in relation to a white-led theater talking about diversity was very powerful. So could any of the white leaders of organizations specifically respond to that testimony and how they intend to do the work of becoming anti-racist while also working on not being white saviors? And I think it's fairly obvious who this question should be directed to. So Sean, if you'd like to take the floor.
Sure. Yeah, when I read that at first, I was like, is this about me? And then I was like, I think this is about me. And then I was like, yeah, of course this should be about me. Like, that's a very fair take on it. I think this exact conversation I've had with a lot of my white leading colleagues that are interested in this conversation. And I think it's a really crucial one. I think we have to push our organizations towards more horizontal methods of leadership. And I think we have to figure out how to really empower the people in our organization that are not like us to really be in leadership roles. And here's the trick of it. Like, here's the real talk of it. So we partnered with the 24-hour plays, right? It was their first time coming to do anything outside of the East Coast. And so we partnered with theaters here, and I didn't choose the playwrights, and I didn't choose who the actors were. We let theaters put forward, right? And it was a huge success. 24,000 people watched it. And then I was really taken to task by several funders for quote unquote losing control of the organization, because we weren't able to maintain what the artistic quality or even take on it is. And so what I think that makes you realize is it's such a bigger conversation. It's not just about who is in power. It's about how do we use this moment of privilege to really break this Eurocentric view on leadership and on what theater is. I mean, because we're kind of talking about something even larger than that, right? So I think everybody, it's not as though you just switch out one person as a leader and change who your audience is, or change who your donors are, or change the structure that people believe that no one made theater before the Greeks, which first of all, can't even possibly be true. So why do we teach that, right? But that's all part of the same system that really puts its value on one type of theater and one type of leadership model. So I think for those of us that are in these roles and have this opportunity to do it, we kind of have to use this moment to really push for more horizontal ways of supporting people. And that means at every moment having these hard conversations, because not all of our donors and audiences are at the same place that we are. And so in some ways we have to meet them where they are and help to move them forward. And I think just acknowledging that we have a tremendous amount of privilege and using it to break this down, to be able to do it, because we're talking about systemic change, and that doesn't happen overnight or just with one thing. So I think that's how we do it. I try to do it by not being a white savior, by saying that it's about other people at every opportunity that I get to be able to do it. And I think that's the only way to be able to do it. And you will all let me know whether I'm successful in that or not as time goes by.
Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you for being willing to be put on the spot that way. I do want to acknowledge we have a couple other questions regarding making performances free to the public so that you can invite. It says, following on the comments Mark made, considering that marginalized communities often can't afford the cost of theater or dance or concerts or operas, should the companies provide free performances? I do believe that there are some discount programs for many and some free programs for others. So I just want to let that sit with the arts leaders. And if you have thoughts that you would like us to send to our webinar attendees on that subject, please send them our way and we will pass those along, because I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. It is 7:59. Can we see everybody that attended for just a moment on Spotlight Me? Let's see everybody if we can. Yeah, I just want to thank you all again so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this conversation and being present for your community. Thank you to everyone who's attended this conversation, watched on Facebook. Thank you to all of you who submitted to the survey to get this conversation started. Again, we will issue a follow-up survey from the webinar registries or to the webinar registries to get some feedback from this event tonight. And we will move this conversation forward into the future. This is just the first of future conversations. We won't let this stop because it is work that we have to continue to do to actually make change. And tucsonartstownhall@gmail. You can email us with any other thoughts or comments, tucsonartstownhall@gmail.com. And we look forward to having more conversations and helping our community come together and be stronger. So thank you all so much. So much gratitude. And can we stop?